Welcome back to Is It Still Good, the channel that's a huge Lord of the Rings fan, but has zero interest in watching The Rings of Power. Today, we're going to get into an outstanding crime drama film from 1994, but first, let's try to sell a book. We're back! Okay, hopefully we sold some books, and we're going to get into a movie that's been one of my favorite movies ever my whole entire adult life, Natural Born Killers by Oliver Stone. And I know you guys love this movie. This is a cult classic, which sounds really weird because in my mind, it's not like a newer film or anything, but I just never looked at this movie as being an older movie. And I think it's in part because of the way it was shot. We're going to get into it. So, 1994, Natural Born Killers, original screenplay written by Quentin Tarantino, rewritten by a couple other people, and directed by Oliver Stone. This is considered a crime drama, runs 1 hour 59 minutes, so 2 hours. Rated R, stars Woody Harrelson, Juliette Lewis, Tom Sizemore, Robert Downey Jr., and Tommy Lee Jones. And I think I'm going to stop quoting Rotten Tomatoes scores because they're all over the place and they really don't matter. I don't know why I do that. I think I just started just reading stats to you guys in the beginning of this channel, but now as we're kind of cruising along, I'm not doing that anymore because Rotten Tomatoes, I think, has this at 48%. What do you people know over there? Who gave this that kind of score? And I think this is the straw that broke the camel's back for me anyway, where I don't need to be referring to Rotten Tomatoes anymore. Let's just skip that. So this had a budget of $34 million and made $110 million in the box office, so a hit. And this movie really affected me deeply when it came out. I was 14 years old. I think I saw it right away. And it's just so busy. It's artfully done. It's masterfully shot and edited in particular. They said there was something like 4,000 negative cuts in this, whatever that means. But it's a lot of work. I know that. I think it's the most of any film, any popular film maybe. I don't know. I could be getting that wrong, but a lot of fast cuts in this. And I can't remember how many film formats are in this. It was something like either 9 or 19. I'll find it in my notes, but there's a lot of different shooting styles present in this film, a lot of fast cuts, a lot of powerful imagery that really help tell the story in a way that makes this movie very ageless. On top of that, Natural Born Killers has one of the strongest soundtracks of any film of all time. I mean, in my list, it's like Lost Highway, Natural Born Killers, what else? Trainspotting off the top of my head. I can't remember the last time it was important to me to listen to an entire soundtrack from a film. Those days seem to be gone. I don't know, but maybe I'm old. Anyway, a bunch of interesting trivia in this, so there's spoilers here, guys, as usual. Juliette Lewis really broke Tom Sizemore's nose in their little tussle in the prison. That's amazing. Oliver Stone wanted her to bulk up for the role, and she didn't really want to do that. But in order to have her fighting, he said that she at least needed to take martial arts classes, so she looked a little more believable when she was scrapping. I guess, it seems to work. She throws a nice knee in a guy's belly in the beginning. Nice, there's like a wave palm strike. When the prison guards come in to scrap with her and Tom Sizemore, she hits somebody with like a nice wave palm that looked pretty authentic. So yeah, I guess it paid off. It was cool. Rodney Dangerfield didn't understand his role, and this is something that's always kind of bothered me. I was never a Rodney Dangerfield fan. I think he was in like Ladybugs and a bunch of other comedies. He was a stand-up comedian. He was funny, but he was like one of those, oh, take my wife, please, like one of those guys. And it just never connected with me. He was kind of before my time even. But that being said, I didn't know him as this like, molester type creep. And because I came in to this earth at a time when Rodney Dangerfield was starring in Natural Born Killers as a molesting father, I can't get it out of my mind. So I think he really tarnished his legacy with this one. I think anyone could have played that role. And I think he really screwed himself up. He didn't understand what he was doing because Oliver Stone was shooting a lot of those scenes against the backdrop of like a family sitcom. I don't know. It's very weird, very disturbing. One thing I noticed about this film is the sexual stuff seemed to bother me more than the violent stuff. And I don't know if I'm just desensitized to violence or what, but The sexual crap in this movie really, really bothered me. Even on this watch, like there's still parts where I'm like, bleh, I don't want to watch this. The riot in the film, they actually went to a real prison and used real prisoners with like rubber weapons. And then they were on lockdown for something and had to hire a bunch of extras, I guess. That was interesting. And there's 18 different formats of film are in the final. So yeah, it's 18. That's a lot. Tarantino, who wrote the script, tried to direct it for $500,000 and failed, and then sold it for $10,000. And he hated the movie until Johnny Cash said he liked it. He bumped into him in an elevator, and he said he and his wife were fans of the film, and it sort of changed Tarantino's mind on the movie on a whole. It is well done, but Oliver Stone and Tarantino have always been at odds with each other about the message. Tarantino's screenplay was largely rewritten, and in it was lost sort of what he was going for, which was, you know, just these people in love, and it was sort of them against the world vibe, and the killing wasn't really the important part. It was more just like, you know, a byproduct of them really not caring about anybody else but themselves sort of deal, I guess, like a Bonnie and Clyde kind of thing. Oliver Stone made it more about like the media's, you know, romanticizing violence and all that other stuff. And you can see tones of both, but I have an interesting note on that coming up. It only took 56 days to shoot, which is interesting, but there's so much editing, which kind of acts as a lot of filler. And I think that's how you get to that 2-hour runtime, but it does not feel like 2 hours. It moves so quickly. The shots are quick, fast, thought-provoking. You just flow with this movie. Even on this last watch, I've seen this a trillion times, and I still enjoyed it. Lily enjoyed it again. It's one of her favorite movies. I saw in the trivia that Woody Harrelson's dad, Charles Harrelson, was actually a hitman who killed a federal judge or something like that. I mean, guys, look that up. But that's crazy, especially if you consider his roles in like True Detective and stuff like that, where he's hunting killers. But yeah, really crazy. Mike Madsen was going to be Mickey, but Warner Brothers wanted somebody less intimidating, and that's smart. Mike Madsen in his heyday was a very intimidating guy, too smooth for this movie. I think Woody Harrelson played it perfectly. He had that kind of impish smile about him, and he kind of represents the demon in their relationship. And Mallory is more sort of like the, she has like the gift of foresight. He can always read her thoughts. She can see into the future somewhat. And I really like how Oliver Stone brought that out in the final. This is Tarantino's second screenplay after True Romance. By the way, also on my list, one of my favorite films ever. We got to watch that one together. Oh, Tori Amos was tapped to play Mallory. And when she met with Oliver Stone, he said something about during all like the sexual scenes that her song Me and My Gun should be playing, which is about her real life rape. And according to what I read, she slapped him in the face. That's pretty funny. I laughed when I read that. I think this is my favorite soundtrack ever. Maybe Lost Highway. They're both up there. So many great songs on this. A lot of variety in the soundtrack too. Natural Born Killers is a love story to me, not about media and serial killers. I really don't get hung up on like the murder stuff, really. I think a lot of people do. And when I watch this, I more am enamored by the chemistry between Mickey and Mallory, what they're willing to do for each other, whether or not fate has brought them together and keeps them together. It just raises a lot of questions. And as an impressionable young man, I sort of had this in the back of my head as like relationship goals. And again, not the killing, just the chemistry and the kinkiness and the fun that they seem to have when they're doing good. Kind of reminds me of Morticia and Gomez Addams. And yes, I say their names in that order because Morticia was like my first big time crush. And they were like an equally weird couple that embraced violence and were kinky and fun. And I just thought that was cool. And Mickey and Mallory come along later in life and they do the same thing. And I'm thinking, you know, I'm seeing a pattern here. But violence stuff aside, I actually really love their chemistry. They have great chemistry together. This film's really funny in spots too. It's hilarious. There's a part where one of the cops is talking about how they shot his partner, and he's saying that he came out of the donut shop with some donuts, and then they cut to him and he's like, in my bear claw.
My bear claw.
Oh, and it's almost like he's lamenting the loss of the bear claw. And I always laugh at that part. It's just kind of silly to me. And you can tell Oliver Stone was having some fun with it. Downey Jr. and Tommy Lee Jones make me really happy. Both their performances are hilarious and over the top. And anytime either of them are on screen, I'm smiling, I'm laughing. I love them both. I think they're great. And then by contrast, Rodney Dangerfield and Tom Sizemore make my skin crawl in this. There's something too authentic about them, especially Tom Sizemore. He is a very gifted actor, especially in the film Heat, also on my list. I love that movie, and he's great in it. He's great in a lot of movies. I think drugs took him down in real life, but in this movie, he's a little too authentic. I could have handled a little less Tom Sizemore in this one. He really makes my skin crawl. They bother me. But Rodney Dangerfield and Tom Sizemore bother me equally as much as Downey Jr. and Tommy Lee Jones make me happy. So it's kind of a wash. And then Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis have so much charisma in this. It's ridiculous. And even though Oliver Stone was trying to make this about the media's obsession with violence and all that other stuff, the love story seems to shine through. And I wrote down a funny note here. Love even conquers a rewrite. So even though it was rewritten and shot in Oliver Stone's vision, I think Tarantino's original idea still rings through in the final. Because my takeaway from this whole thing is, what wouldn't Mickey and Mallory do for each other? You know, there's a part where they're getting married and Mickey cuts both of their hands in a very archaic way to be romantic, I guess. And as their blood is mingling and goes into the oceans, it becomes animated. And Mallory very sweetly says, "We'll be living in all the oceans now." And I just think, that's perfect, man. That's so good. That's love, right? There's muddled tones in it, but it's still great. And the muddled tones are actually interesting. These are defining roles for both Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis. Woody Harrelson went on to a very storied career. Juliette Lewis I really enjoyed in Strange Days. I think I prefer her character more in that film. That being said, she's good as Mallory. The one thing I noticed, though, is her intelligence wanes and waxes. Like, there's parts where she seems very ditzy and kind of out of it, and other parts where she's very in control, cold and calculated. You know, maybe it's all the murdering, you know, sharpened her up. I don't know. But I did notice that Mallory's intelligence seems to come and go throughout the film, and I noticed that just on this rewatch, by the way. That's new. Okay, final note. They do not make them like this anymore. This movie would never be greenlit now. Everybody be freaking out. I mean, there were politicians that were saying that this caused a bunch of copycat murders and stuff like that, and it certainly did. I read about one couple that watched it and then went and did some terrible stuff. So, yeah, maybe it's a bad influence. I don't know, but I never look at art as the cause of anything. I mean, it's hard for me to even vibe with, like, this causes that in general. Like, oh, a bad childhood leads to that. Because I've known people that come from terrible childhoods that turned out to be violent and bad people. And then I also know other people with even worse childhoods that turned out to be like humanitarian healer types. So I think it just depends on the person, and I don't know how it all lands on you. But you got to be in the right mood for Natural Born Killers, that's for sure. And in the past, if you asked me what numeric rating I would give Natural Born Killers, 10 out of 10 all day. But as a grown man, objectively with my own movie review channel now, I have to shoot you guys straight. And upon a rewatch, I gave it an 8.5 out of 10, which is very respectable. However, I feel like we would have gotten to that 9.5 land if Oliver Stone and Tarantino were on the same page. And if Oliver Stone embraced Tarantino's vision, I wonder what we would have gotten. That being said, what we did get is pretty damn good and definitely worth watching. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend you do. If you're squeamish concerning violence or any of that, a lot of the violence in this movie is implied. They don't show everything. For me, the most traumatic parts were the sexual abuse angles that they were showing. I don't know. It's just bleh. Like, that's the kind of stuff that, like, what do you do, you know? So I don't care for those parts in the film. However, I do understand they were essential in helping you sympathize with, in particular, Mallory. And it almost kind of softens her violent actions later, you know what I mean? Like, at least in the eyes of the viewer, you know, for the mechanic of storytelling. Obviously, I'm not condoning anything in this film. Don't be weird. But what I am saying is, you know, everybody they seem to kill seems like a douchebag. And again, it's not right, but like, I know it's a movie and I just don't get worked up over it. There's a part where they do a reenactment where, you know, right after they shot that cop that was lamenting his bear claw, they're speeding away and there's a bicyclist on the side of the road pedaling, and Mallory shoots him off his bike, and you hear her audio saying, I always wanted to take a shot at them. They're not that easy to hit. I think that's hilarious. Like, there's funny moments like that. So yeah, like, I guess I should be more sensitive to the idea of loss of human life, but I also understand this is a movie. I'm not like some infant child that doesn't get reality, you know? So again, see that stuff in person, horrific. See it in a movie, maybe entertainment. And it was in this case. I thought the violence was actually kind of fun. And I don't know, kind of a darker mood. It leaves you in a lighter spot. It doesn't end too sour. Downey Jr. is really funny. It's dark. But a really good movie to watch with your significant other, because it's funny, like if you've been arguing about little things lately, or you're not really, in a great spot in your relationship, and you show your partner this film, it kind of puts things in perspective, like what would Mickey and Mallory do for each other, and why have we been fighting lately? At least in my experience, like, Lily and I watched this, and afterwards we were all lovey-dovey. So I think that this is a good movie for couples to watch, to kind of vent their frustrations and realize that they, yes, indeed, are on the same team. Sometimes you forget when you're alone and cooped up and you start arguing and you think this person is against me now. When it comes to, in terms of the rest of the world, that could be the only strong ally you really have. And I think that's what's good about this film for couples. Very healing, very therapeutic, cathartic in the way that you just get to vent through these characters doing these fictitious acts of craziness, right? So again, nobody's condoning anything. I'm just saying it's a damn good movie, and you got to give it a watch. It's freaking awesome. Next up, let me check my notes, guys, while I have you here. I know this went long, but how about you vote for me? Next up, I got Smoking Aces, The Thin Red Line, Princess Mononoke, Groundhog Day, Unforgiven, Death Becomes Her, True Romance, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Miller's Crossing, Weird Science, Boogie Nights, Sin City, LA Confidential, Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, Babe, Falling Down, Sling Blade, Fargo, Bram Stoker's Dracula, Jurassic Park, the original, Event Horizon, and Batman Returns. Just that lineup alone, vote below what you want to see me do next, and I shall make it so. All right? So anyway, guys, subscribe, share the videos. Thank you for helping me grow the channel. I love you to pieces. If you're going to buy my books, buy them in your local bookstore. Support them first, me second. And I will see you next time on Is It Still Good?
Duncan, Mocha, Wayne Gale. You want reality? You got it.